So the remaining part of this health, the remaining part of this health module will be structured as follows. We are going to discuss the NRHM in today's class. We will have a discussion of infant and child mortality and MMR. This will be a special lecture by Shashwata Ghosh. Uh, it will be held in around mid-December. And so after NRHM, I'm going to shift to access to healthcare facilities. So this is a discussion on health. We will have a class on unemployment. Sorry. Poverty and inequality, and one on human development. And this will finish off our course. So in poverty and in unemployment, it will be just a paper by Arup Mitra. It's an ILO working paper. In case of poverty and inequality, we will look at different measures, use data to estimate poverty and inequality.
Sir?
Yes. And trends in হ্যাঁ বলো
Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Sir, what is MMR? The third point, infant
Maternal
mortality, child mortality.
maternal
Okay,
mortality.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Trends in India, global comparisons. And finally, we will look at human development and multidimensional poverty. Here, the focus will be mainly on how to estimate them. We don't have too much discussion. So, this is the structure of your course. I'll finish off NRHM, then I'll go to healthcare facilities. Now, if you come to if you look at the Indian economy, at the start of the planning period, the Planning Commission had adopted what is known as the Nehruvian strategy. It was based on heavy industries, and growth would trickle down or percolate to the low income people. So ultimately, it would be basically the high income people who would gain, but it was also expected that the benefits would seep down to the lower economic strata so that all sectors of the economy would benefit. Well, in reality, what happened was there was industrial stagnation from 1960s. The Hindu rate of growth at 3.5, and inequality and poverty started to increase. In 1970s, Indira Gandhi, who was the prime minister, launched a frontal attack on poverty, Garibi Hatao, with the slogan. It was political, partly because Congress had split at that point. She wanted to retain her strength. So that is why she went for a focused on poverty, but it was also the realization that the trickle down mechanism had not operated. Well, how far Garibi Hatao succeeded is doubtful. There were changes in government. She also died in, I think, 84, 85, I think, 85. Meanwhile, fiscal deficits started rising and the font lines of the economy, it was just, they started to emerge and they started to grow. So around 1980s, when Rajiv Gandhi came to power, he introduced a set of structural adjustment programs. And we talk about the reforms in the 90s, but to pay him due credit, the actual program reform started in under VP Singh, his finance minister. Rajiv Gandhi also brought in Sam Pitroda as the tech minister advisor, and all these led to changes in the Indian economy. Then in the 1990s, early 92, India fell into an economic crisis and had to borrow from the IMF and World Bank. Now the IMF and World Bank offers conditional loans. And the condition is that you have to implement structural changes in the economy. So the structural adjustment program started in the 80s. They accelerated in the 90s. Manmohan Singh, Narasimha Rao, they started, they continued with the reforms of VP Singh, but it was much more pervasive. In the early part of, I think from 99 or 2000, the BJP government came to power and India started to reap the benefits of the second phase reforms. The growth rate accelerated, double-digit growth rate, and the picture that was portrayed was shining India. That became the catchword. So everyone expected that with India growing at such a impressive way, the BJP government would be voted back to power. But in reality, what happened in 2004 was a shock defeat. The India government lost. The India government lost. Is it better now? The India government lost and lost to the UPA government. Now, what the UP government learned was the growth is not enough. Under the BJP government, under Vajpayee, the growth was in double digits. But the social sector, health, education, particularly health, the situation was abysmal. So, growth is fine, but the social sector too has to be developed. Around 2005, 6, it was 2004. So around 2004 and 5, Sonia Gandhi, as the chairman of the UPA, acknowledged that India was lagging behind in health. And it was not just lagging behind the developed countries. Even in comparison to the South Asian countries, India was lagging behind. India's health spending as percentage of GDP was less than 1%. The maternal and child health indicators were just like as in sub-Saharan Africa. Huge interstate inequality. Kerala marching ahead, racing ahead. Bihar, UP, well, you know what the situation is there. Some indicators, institutional and safe delivery. Institutional delivery means the child is delivered in an institution, in a healthcare facility. It can be government, it can be private, it can be a primary health center, whatever, but it is delivered in an institution. Safe delivery includes institution delivery, but it is also includes home delivery if certain conditions are satisfied. The home delivery has to be assisted by at least a trained midwife or nurse. In that case, it is called assisted delivery. So safe delivery is institutional plus assisted delivery at home. But this proportion was very low. Maternal health, very concerning indicators, high rates of anemia. Antenatal care services, very low rates of utilization. Most of the delivery was at home. So the question of postnatal checkup did not arise. Antenatal means checkups before birth. The first checkup should be within the first 3 months of pregnancy, and it should be followed up. At that time, it was 3. There should be a total of 3 antenatal checkups. Now, World Health Organization is recommending 4. So India has moved to 4 checkups. And after the birth, there should be a checkup within 14 days. And as a result of all this, the maternal mortality was very high. Anemia, for instance, I'll give you information. So when I had gone to Udham Singh Nagar, I was speaking with the hospital people over there, and I had told them that, look, you're making a mistake when you're reporting the figures. I mean, I was in charge of monitoring the reporting over there in Uttarakhand and Delhi. So what we found was that if you have a certain number of deliveries, let us say you have 100 deliveries, they also had to put in a figure how many were given antibiotics and how many were given blood transfusions. So it was found that we found that 100% were being given. No, sorry, it was like this. Let me type it out. It will be easier to understand for you. How many births in hospital? Number of Okay, so the hospitals were supposed to fill in this data. So suppose you have got 100 births or rather deliveries, okay, because birth can be higher than deliveries. So suppose you have got 100 deliveries. You can expect that the number of pregnancies will be less than 100. All of them will not be pregnant, complicated. Let us say it's 80. How many of these 80s are given antibiotics? So what can be the maximum number? 80. How many are given blood transfusion? Again, what is the maximum number?
So the maximum is 80.
So we were getting something like this. So there were some mistakes in the data. So when I asked them that why is this mistake? I mean, if it's 80, it cannot be above 80. And there was one reason, a technical reason, that the complicated pregnancies were not being defined properly. That was one reason. The more important reason was they said that whenever a woman comes to us, 100% of the women, in fact, it was not even 95. It was like this. The women who come to us, almost all of them have anemia. So before delivery, we have to give them blood transfusion. That is why we are reporting this as 100. We are not making a distinction between complicated and normal pregnancies. So this gives you an idea of the level of anemia which is prevailing in different states, particularly the northern underdeveloped states. Child immunization program, infant mortality. I mean, again, immunization, the development progress is not too bad, but infant child mortality you will see is very bad. So overall, the maternal and child health indicators, India was lagging behind, and it was very clear that they would not achieve the Millennium Development Goals. So Sonia, mainly due to the interest of Sonia Gandhi, who was the UPA chairman at that time, Manmohan Singh, the minister, I don't remember who was the health minister, they introduced a National Rural Health Mission. This is now renamed as an urban component was introduced in 2015, National Urban Health Mission, and then the two were combined in 2015. But we are concerned with the NRHM because National Health Mission is a failure. Nothing is being done. It's a failure. There's nothing to discuss. So this National Rural Health Mission, it was based on the Common Minimum Needs Program. It started with the proposition that health is an important concept and we have to provide efficient and affordable healthcare to the rural population, which comprised at that time 74 crores. So you had to have two types of efforts. One is at the macro level and second is at the grassroots level. So in 2005, all the different health schemes were stopped and they were brought under a flagship program, National Rural Health Mission. The objective was, I'm quoting from the mission statement, carry out the necessary corrections in the healthcare delivery system so that the availability of healthcare increases and the quality also improves, particularly for the poor people, the women and the children. Okay, so affordable, increase in supply, affordable supply, quality supply. These were the three targets and the basic objective was architectural correction. That is, the system, healthcare delivery system would be changed. Some of the important architectural corrections were the introduction of female health activists. At the grassroots level, you had what is known as the accredited social health activist. They are called ASHAs in short. So these women would go about and motivate people to adopt proper behavior, deliver at home, avail of antenatal and postnatal services, deliver in institutions, immunize children, and so on. The three-tiered public health system, it is sub-centers and primary health centers at the local and community health centers at the local level, district hospitals at a obviously district level, and in the state capitals you would have specialty hospitals. So the referral was supposed to be, it was a pyramidal structure. The referral was supposed to be from the bottom. So if you fall ill, you will go to the primary sub-center or the primary health center, PHC. If they cannot address your needs, they will refer you to the upper level, community center. Community center will refer you, if necessary, to the district hospital. And the government hospitals will look after specialty diseases, very special diseases, not the common diseases. But in reality, what happens is that people directly bypass all these institutions and go to the either district hospital or to the medical colleges, hospitals at the state capital. Simultaneously, it was realized that the people were the stakeholders in the health system. They are benefiting, and so they should be involved in the monitoring and planning of the health system at the local level. So you can't have all the people coming together and planning. There would be chaos. So the plan was, the planning would be through the Panchayati Raj systems, Gram Panchayats. And simultaneously, the part in where I was involved was that all the health centers, primary health centers, sub centers, community CHCs, hospitals, every week they would upload data on a national portal. And this data can be used to facilitate evidence-based planning, monitoring, and supervision. You have real-time data, you can respond accordingly. Among other steps was that the healthcare was supposed to be delivered by sub-centers, the lowest level, primary health centers, and community health centers. So people don't go to these units simply because they are very underdeveloped. So the first step is to ensure that there's no overcrowding. People were jumping the queue and directly going to the district or state hospitals. So instead of doing that, they should come from the below. Only if these lower level, lower tier units cannot address the problems will they go to the upper level. So the sub-centers, etc., would be strengthened. So what you actually have is, in case of sub-centers, you have some population norms. There should be one sub-center per so many populations. A plan had been made and sub-centers have been opened up accordingly. There should be primary health centers per so many population, community health center per so many population. The problem was that the population had changed, obviously gone up, so you need more of these health units. So the health centers, the number of centers were required was recalculated using 2001 population norms. New centers were set up and existing sub-centers were upgraded. Primary health centers were also upgraded so that 50% of them would provide 24-hour services, not service from 10 to 2 or 10 to 5. And the long run target was that all primary health centers and 3,000 community health centers would be upgraded and to become 24-hour FRUs, first referral units. So that means if they are referred, the sub-center will refer them to PHCs or CHCs. So this is a bit of an old paper which I had written in 2010. So you can see what is required sub-centers. You can see that there was an improvement, increase in numbers, but it was still short of what was required. I mean, in terms of particularly sub-centers, also in terms of primary health centers and community health centers. Don't pay too much attention to this. It's mainly data. This is state-wise data. And based on some surveys which had been undertaken. And overall, what you can see is you have wide variations. And well, I mean, NHM did lead to an increase, but the infrastructural facilities was short of what was required. As you can see from the second point, upgradation started in 65% of CHCs, but it was completed in only a third of CHCs. 46% of the sub-centers don't have any building. Now, another important thing was the concept of high focus states. There were certain states, Assam, Bihar, UP, which had very poor indicators, MCH indicators, maternal and child health indicators. So these were called high focus states, and the government paid special attention to the infrastructure and progress in these high focus states. They are also called EAG states. I mean, these are just some stray statistics. PHCs with labor rooms where the child is delivered, very low. UP, you don't even have irregular electric supply. So just imagine, you're delivering a child and the power fails. You are in darkness because delivery can occur at night also. So PHCs particularly were very poor. CHCs were somewhat better. Surveys were undertaken in different states, and this is what it was found. Gilk, Kaveri Gill, incidentally, she's the daughter of the IPS officer, forget his name, very famous IPS officer in Punjab. She found an absence of toilet facilities and medical waste disposal system in many of these grassroots institutions. They have large cleaning staff, but the units are not clean. People don't work at all. Basically, the system was used to offer patronage. So that means if I'm in charge of a sub-center or PHC, I become a dada. The money is used to give benefits to a group of people. They will be employed, get money, they will serve me when I want, but their function is not regarding the SHC, these healthcare units. Their function is that when the vote comes, they have to go out and vote. If I call a political meeting, they have to come for the political meeting and so on. So the politicians basically used the staff to undertake, to get their support, get a very loyal group of army. Equipment, I mean, the situation was again very bad. ECG machines, this is a basic machine, cardiac monitors, fumigators, baby cradles. After the baby is born, she has to be kept in a cradle. BP machines, blood pressure machines, not available. Iron, IFA tablets, iron folic acid tablets, very important for anemia. Oral contraceptive pills, vitamin A, nothing. ORS, they were not available in 75% of the PHCs. Basic medicine, albendazole, mabendazole, bandages, out of stock. No one knew when they were available. So patients had to buy them privately at a much higher cost. So instead of offering affordable healthcare, what happened was the out-of-pocket expenditure remained high. Out-of-pocket expenditure is a expenditure on healthcare which is met by the person, which is not reimbursed. Like for instance, when generally most of you are insured, so when you are going for the hospital, you have to pay the money, but you get back the money. But out of pocket is the part of the expenditure which is not reimbursed. the allocation of funds, there were problems from the center and state also. It was said that, see, you have tight funds and untight funds. Does anyone know what is the difference or guess what is the difference between tight and untight funds?
Sir, are tight funds allocated to a specific purpose and untight funds are just like allocated for health expenditure without any specification, something like that?
Yes. So in case of tight funds, you have to spend it on that purpose. If it's for machinery, you have to spend it on machinery. If it's on staff, you have to spend it on staff. But if it is untied, you can use it in a very flexible manner. You have a shortage in a particular direction. Maybe I have an machinery problem, so I use it to buy machines. In your case, your health unit is falling to pieces. You can use it for maintenance. So untied funds are very useful, but as you can see from the figures, untied funds were actually not distributed. Staff shortage. This is again a very controversial issue. ANMs, for instance, are supposed to stay at night in sub-centers because they are in charge of deliveries. So you don't know when you have to deliver a child. If you go back to a city, you're just not available. But if you want them to stay, you have to provide staff quarters, which are either not available, very poor conditions, even unsafe. So that means if a village girl has to deliver, and remember, delivery is not very planned. It can happen at any time. One doesn't know when it happens. They start the labor pain. They have to be taken to the health center immediately. So what happens is, if they're taken to the health centers, people are not there. So now it means that the original purpose was lost. These women either deliver at home or private providers, or they have to be taken to the district hospital. Now, auxiliary nurse midwives. So it has been, in some countries, you have a system of compulsory services. Compulsory services is that once you pass out, you have to serve for a certain period in a rural area. Now, they have been implemented very successfully in certain countries. But when in other countries, they have been a failure. Now, it has been shown that in the countries where compulsory service has been successfully introduced, they have to be supported by economic incentives. You just can't make it compulsory and say that, okay, I'll serve over there. You have to offer them different types of incentives. What type? It varies from country to country. Some states like Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh have been successful in designing a very attractive combination of financial and non-financial incentives. In some areas, what happens is that if you come from the rural background, you might be willing to accept a rural posting. In West Bengal, ANMs were selected using a location-specific policy. So if you want ANMs for hospitals in Bankura, you say that only people in Bankura can apply. And you say straight away that I'm going to appoint 40 ANMs in Bankura, 30 in Purulia, 20 in Darjeeling. And in the application form, you state that where you want to apply, in Darjeeling or Bankura or Purulia. So you have matching of demand and supply. But right now, so there are efforts which have ensured or trying to ensure availability of staff. Even if you appoint, you might find that the staff is not there. One reason is that, look, you can have good facilities for residing, but you can provide a good quarter. But the doctors also have families. ANMs also have families. They will have children. And so it's just not a matter of quarters. It's a matter of providing for the children also. Education, if the area doesn't have good school, a married doctor with children will not want to go there. If supply of electricity, potable water, drinkable water is not regular, they will not want to take their family or not want to stay there. They will commute. Safety of women is a major issue in UP. So Gulati, Subhash Chand Gulati, he was my colleague in Delhi. He said that if you give them high pay, they will compensate. They will be prepared to accept all these difficulties. But Gail pointed out that no, this is not true. If you just give them high pay, they will take the high pay, but they will still absent themselves. Because even if you get high pay, that doesn't compensate for lack of supply, lack of electricity, water, schools. And anyway, after the pay commission revisions, pay was already quite high. What you need is, they are having a very secure tenure. They can't be show-caused. They can't be thrown out of job. So they accept the job, they accept the high pay, but just commute. And there's no accounting, no monitoring. So that is the main problem, not high pay. The posting of people, I mean, just think of a case. Suppose you have a mining area. What type of problems can occur in a mining area? What type of health problems can occur in a mining area?
So accidents of sorts.
Accidents, respiratory diseases, right? That is expected to occur in a mining area. So if you're setting up a health unit close to a mine, you should have an orthopedic. You should have a person who specializes in respiratory diseases. In Tamnar, Chhattisgarh, an orthopedic surgeon had been posted. He had not performed any single surgery in the 18 months preceding the survey. So for 18 months, he was just sitting, he was reporting, signing the register, and no patients. In Bastar, Chhattisgarh, an ophthalmic surgeon, that is a surgeon of the eye, he did not have any eye cases. So what he did was, there were a lot of general surgeries coming. There were no general surgeon. So this eye specialist had to undertake general surgeries. Another person, he was a specialized person. Obviously, so he didn't have any cases. He was again just sitting idle, like the orthopedic surgeon. So you basically have to have a mapping that, okay, these are the areas in which I have health units. This is the epidemiological profile. I require this type of staff. And so the staff should be posted accordingly. Now, I've already referred to Ashas. See, it has been shown in different studies that if you have local women, if you can involve them, even if they are not very highly qualified, very briefly trained, they can incentivize you, they can motivate you to change your behavior. So NRHM in plans had said that every village should have at least one Asha who will act as an intermediary between the patients, target patients, and the public health system. They will be given a basic orientation training and some basic drug kit and told that, okay, if they have fever, you check this and give them this medicine. Some very simple medicines. They will be given special incentives if they can bring women and children to avail of antenatal services, institutional delivery, and so on. And every village has to prepare health plans. They will be involved in preparing the health plans also. A huge number of Ashas have been selected, they have been trained. About 90% of villages have been covered. But in many cases, these Ashas are recruited from influential families. So if there's some big shot, his wife is appointed and she stays at home, earns the money, and the work is either not done or the husband does the work. Now the husband can go about giving medicine, but regarding maternal and child health, do you think that they will be very successful? That if a husband comes and tells the wife, if a man comes and tell the woman that, okay, you have to adopt such contraceptions, you have to go for breastfeeding and so on. Training also was very discontinuous, very irregular. The norm was 28 days. In a year, actually it's given only 12 days. They don't get kids. I mean, when I was serving in 12, 13, by that time kids had stopped. But when the paper was written in 10, kids were not adequate, contained drugs close to expiry date, and once they finished, they were not replenished. But still, even with all these problems, Ashas had a major impact. The proportion of women taking 3 antenatal checkups, immunization, increased. What is necessary is to make them work harder. They have done a lot, give them more incentives, give them more information through training so that the system improves further. What actually happened was in 11-12, incentives were reduced. Now, I had said that the regular uploading of data, weekly uploading of data, that is also very important. Because you have grassroots data, you can prepare indicators every week from different areas. At the district level, block level, so that planning becomes very easy. And you can respond to weaknesses in the healthcare system. Even the private sector is supposed to upload some data, less data, but still. You can identify hotspots where there's a problem, progress, identify local level problems. So the health management information system was developed. Simultaneously, a mother and child tracking system, MCTS, was developed. The mother and child was given a unique ID number and their details added to an online database along with their phone numbers. So when they went for a checkup, all the details were uploaded. This had 2 advantages. When the time came for the next checkup, an SMS was automatically sent to them that, okay, this is the time, go for a checkup. Second is, particularly in the case of first pregnancies, you know that women often go back to the maternal homes. during the pregnancies. So that means maybe the first antenatal checkup is in one place where they are married, then they go back. So this system breaks. But if you have a national portal, even if you go back, you can show the health card. The doctors will type in the UID and they can see what has been happening. So you have a continuum of care services, a continuity. Every month, they generate a chart. So the ANMs and ASHAs are given a list that, okay, in this month, these are the people who require these services and this is their mobile number. So now it was up to the ASHAs and ANMs to check up, to follow up. Go to these people and say that, look, your checkup is now due, so please go. The problem was in entering the data. I mean, internet connection was a problem, but you had other problems. Poor training. So the persons entering the data did not know what to do. What I saw was that if they asked any question, the best thing was, the answers were not simply adequate. They were given a scolding. You are very stupid. You are very foolish. You don't understand anything. You don't listen. So after some time, those who entered the data just kept quiet. Secondly, what happened was something like this. You'll understand from this. Yeah. Those who were very clever, you have a question set like this. What they put is how many deliveries in hospital, they put in the correct numbers. They don't have the data for here, these three figures. Okay. So what they do is, number of complicated pregnancies, they just type in a number. Given antibiotics, it has to be less than 85. Let me put 75. Given blood transfusion, let me put 62. They enter fake data. But if you look at the data, you can't distinguish it's fake. It's consistent. In fact, I showed that before the ministry, I showed that if the data is inconsistent, then that implies that the data is correct. You have to identify why the data is inconsistent. But if the data is like this, which is perfectly consistent, that means it's manufactured. In some places, particularly in UP, they are given a target and they are told that you just have to meet the target. If you don't, you are in trouble. In the COVID handling, for instance, in UP, the district level officials were told that, look, your district cannot show COVID patients above this limit. You have to keep it down. If the COVID patients increased, they were abused. So what they did was, instead of reporting the correct figures, they simply falsified the figures. Labs were told that, okay, even if it's a COVID positive, when you issue the report, make it negative. And this passed downwards. The district hospital officials scolded the block level officials, block level scolded the unit level officials, and so on. So there was a failure to update data. The MCTS, everything was HMIs. The data was not being implemented properly. The data was not being uploaded properly. Slow internet connection meant that the data could not be accessed. In 2011-12, financial incentives were lowered. This affected morale. Then more important is phone numbers change. You're sending an SMS, but the person has quietly changed her phone number. So it doesn't help it. And so the MCTS, within almost 1 year, it was right from the start of the introduction, it was failing. A very important scheme is the Janani Surakha Yojana. Women from BPL families, SC/ST households, or any women from a high focus state, they were eligible. Ashas identified pregnant women, encouraged them to take 3 ANC checkups, deliver in institutions, and when they were going to the institution for delivery, they would be accompanied by the Asha. So, after the delivery occurred, both the woman and Asha would be given some money. So, this was expected to give incentives, encourage people to deliver in institutions. And this is what actually occurred. Institutional delivery increased. Whether infant mortality declined is not clear. And another impact was that Ashas would be given the incentive only if the delivery occurred in a public hospital. So there was a shift from the private to the public sector. But that's not necessarily bad. So what happened was there were fewer deliveries at home in private hospitals, more delivery in public hospitals. The number of institutional deliveries went up by 15%. The increase in government hospitals was 22%. Subsequent studies have shown that there was a decline in the childbirth in private hospitals at home. So these are the side benefits. Finally, remember that one of the objectives of NRHM was to ensure that healthcare access would be equitable and affordable. For this, we have to look at the out-pocket expenditure. So we can see that it has declined from 71% to 63%, which is a good sign. In urban area, however, you can see it has gone up. It has gone up among the poor people. Over here. In urban, in Q3 and Q4. So these are some concerning signs. The expenditure per case, it's not very important. Let me drop it. Catastrophic expenditure. Catastrophic expenditure is said to occur when the healthcare expenditure is above 10% of your family income. That was the original definition by Wagstaff. Subsequently, it was changed. Various other thresholds were suggested. 25%, 40% were suggested as threshold. So if your health expenditure is 40% of household expenditure, you're supposed to have a catastrophic health expenditure. You can see that the increase is statistically significant. It's gone up. 20, 24, 21, 24. Even if you take the 40% limit, it has gone up, though much slightly. And it has gone up in a significant manner. The sources of funding, you can see that 50 household income savings has become the main source. Borrowing, it has declined. This is a good thing. Contribution from friends, relative. Okay, sale of assets. See, sale of assets is bad. That has gone down. Borrowings is also bad. That has also gone down. So these are some good signs. So NRHM does have a lot of limitations, but till 13-14, it did function well, and it had, despite all the limitations, it did have major effects. It improved quite a few of the indicators. And so one can see that the beginning of NRHM was successful. The problem was, subsequently, the central government lost interest, India government lost interest in the NRHM. So NRHM is there, but there is no scope for evaluation. And the situation is more or less stagnating. And with expenditure on healthcare in real terms going down, you can expect that the situation is becoming worse and worse. Okay. So this discussion is based on two papers. I'll post the two papers in my website, in the Google Classroom, and you can see it. So we still have about 15-20 minutes, and I'm stopping the recording.